All right, let me get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Alex. I lead ShareBird. And so ShareBird, just so people, if you're not familiar with what we do, we're a Q&A site where leading executives answer your questions. I think the way we get job knowledge has changed. We learn a lot more from each other than from, school, but getting a hold of the right people to learn from is really hard. And so what we do is we make it really easy. Oh, hi, Jenna. I'm going to add you. We make it really easy for you know the people you want to learn from to be able to share their knowledge, and then we make it searchable on ShareBird. So if you go to sharebird.com, there's a big search bar up top. You can search thousands of answers and get very fast, credible answers from people that that you admire. Hi, Candace. I'm going to let you in right now. I'm getting pings as well as I'm giving announcements. And so you can do that. So go to the search bar if you have any questions around KPIs, around career path questions, project questions, challenges you're running into, frameworks. You can go there and search, and there's a lot of great insights from other incredible product marketing leaders. I have two announcements, and I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to Kevin. So my first announcement is, are you internally trying to scale best practice and knowledge sharing from your most experienced people? Are you trying to help facilitate that knowledge transfer from the people on your team to other people? If so, for example, like if somebody is like a rock star at narrative or something else, we're rolling out. We call it ShareBird for Teams right now, but it's a secure private ShareBird where basically we make it easy for your team to do private AMAs, and then for the rest of the team to be able to search that and really just scale best practice and knowledge sharing. This is free. We're rolling it out in a beta. If you're interested, if this is important to you, I'd love for you to let me know. Just email me, alex@sharebird.com. I'd love to try to help create your own knowledge base for your team to be able to find answers from people when they need it. Okay, so that's the first announcement. The second announcement is, this event is around messaging and all things, messaging's one of the things that underpins it. A lot of the times is really good market research and understanding, your audience. And so we're going to actually be hosting a market research summit in November 14th through the 16th. And there you'll learn from leaders from Google, Adobe, Shopify, Nextdoor, and others around how they do market research. It's free to join, and you can sign up right here. I'm going to drop the link in chat. That should go to everybody right there. So there's that. And then also, if you're interested in trying ShareBird for Teams, there's my email. You can email me there. All right, those are the two announcements. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Kevin in the panel.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. First off, thank you so much to ShareBird for having me as your moderator today. My name's Kevin. I was formerly the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Airtable, and now I am a consultant where I help startup tech companies with their messaging and their narrative and their strategy, et cetera. I'm really excited about this topic because messaging is often sort of one of the core skill sets, for product marketers. And we have a really incredible panel here for you all today. I want to let everyone have a chance to introduce themselves. So what I'm going to do is we'll have an icebreaker question too. So do a quick intro, and then the icebreaker question is, what is a recent movie, TV show, or book that you experienced recently that you liked? And my answer is a movie called Past Lives. I watched. It's a movie about these two young Korean children that are really, really close, and then one moves away, and then they reconnect 20 years later, and it's like super emotional, really great story. I'm gonna hand the mic over to Jenna.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenna Crane. I'm the head of product marketing at Klaviyo, which is an intelligent marketing automation platform that powers smarter digital relationships. Let's see. Recent is a tough question because I have a toddler and a baby, so I don't see anything recent or consume anything really for myself. But I would say, yeah, it's definitely not recent, but the book Tomorrow tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, I think. That's one of the best ones I've read in a while. And, growing up with video games and, a passionate Sims user myself, it was really fun to see that reflected in kind of a fiction narrative.
I love that. Thank you. Next, we'll hand it over to Ben.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Rawnsley-Johnson. I'm the head of product marketing craft at Atlassian, where we're really interested in trying to unleash the potential of all teams. It's not a recent book, but I've recently been rereading them. I think most of us have these books on their list, and in my experience, not enough people have actually read them. But going back and rereading Clay on the innovator's dilemma right now, I think is really appropriate for all of us. Gen AI is creating a moment in time where we're refactoring all of the jobs to be done for people, and history doesn't tend to repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. I think the context that Clay wrote that book probably nearly 20 years ago is still just as true today. And it's striking how many lessons are still really relevant to us as we go through this today. So I'd really recommend everybody go back and get re-familiar with Clay.
That's a classic. All right, and over to you, Candace.
Yeah, well, hi everyone. Thanks for having us. I'm Candace Marshall. I am currently a Senior Director of Product Marketing at Zendesk, a customer experience platform. Today, I lead product marketing for our core services. So that includes Agent Workspace, platform analytics, and more. Jenna, similar to you, I'm a newer mom, and so I don't have much time. So I've really been enjoying British Bake Off on Netflix. For those that don't know it or don't like baking, that's okay. I'm the same. They're like 45 minutes of feel good of folks, amateur bakers come in and showing off their skills. But I find that it's a great way to unwind at the end of the day.
Super fun.
I know.
All right. Well, great. Let's get into it. For those of you who are watching, please feel free to ask questions. We're going to switch gears at the midpoint. Let's get right into it. The first question I have for the panel is, how do you differentiate positioning from messaging? And how do you ensure that the messaging supports the positioning strategy? That's the first question. Yeah.
I have an analogy here that I want to test with this group in the interest of messaging testing, of course. And this is like very geeky, but if you all remember back to your chemistry days where you have a gas, a liquid, and a solid, right? So positioning is the gas. Positioning is the strategy that infuses through everything that your company does. The liquid, which is the slightly more tangible version of that, still internal only, your messaging, and things like your roadmap, your pricing strategy even. But that is all a derivative of your positioning in the market, your positioning strategy. And then even more solid and tangible than that is your actual copy and your product itself. So the way I think of it is positioning as a strategy informs the messaging, which informs what you actually put out into the market. What do we think? Does it work? Yes, thumbs up. The too academic.
I like that. No, I think the transition point, the energy you put in to go from phase to phase or release.
That's so true. Yeah.
That's kind of like the folks that you work with across marketing, copywriters, content marketers, designers, creative, brand.
Absolutely. And at each point, it's more tangible.
Well, I'm questioning, why do we, this question came up quite often when I was looking at all the pre-questions. Why is it hard? Why do we think people are confused between positioning and messaging? Why is that, still hard to understand for marketers and PMMs alike? Curious.
Yeah, I had a personal experience with this here at Atlassian. So I was doing something else here at Atlassian and was asked to take on this role, leading the craft. And, one of the pillars that was called out by leadership here in the company was messaging. And it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. As a marketer, I'm like, hey, look, we do more than messaging. We're more than words on a page. We're more than a headline at a keynote. And I really kind of battled with like what I actually want to be known for and want our product marketers to be famous for is like really good positioning, of which my messaging is a really great signal of that. And this was a really tough journey for me personally, because I think that as much as I wanted to battle that, I think I really needed to get clear on a very different mindset than I traditionally had as a marketer, which is always being kind of like a little bit insecure and very focused on like how my work was driving outcome, like impact. We use it all the time. You know, I'm a marketer and I'm a buddy to sales and we're driving revenue and we're accountable for the number. And I kind of turned a switch in my head to go from optimizing for impact to optimizing for alignment. And through positioning, you're effectively optimizing for alignment. If I can draw a through line between the market opportunity, the customer and the buyer, the persona, their job to be done, our product, our differentiated value proposition associated with that product, if I can do nothing else as product marketing but draw that line and amplify that internally and in the market, I'll have been really successful. But that's a very uncomfortable place, I think, for a lot of us as marketers, where we're so used to needing to show up on a bunch of metrics that I think that's often that can distract us from that very critical work of that alignment piece, that positioning piece that drives great messaging, that drives better impact in market, that drives revenue and profitability for the company.
Yeah. And that resonates a lot with me as well. Right now, just I think what a lot of folks react to is the copy itself, right? But a lot goes into that before it gets to what the customer is seeing, what your go-to-market teams are seeing. And I think, Ben, that's why there's always a lot of controversy. Kevin, answering your question, like, why are there so many questions? It's because it really does start positioning. And for me, I remember when I was starting out as a product marketer, I was like, positioning, messaging, what's the difference? Why do I need one or the other? But to Ben's point, it really does start with positioning, which is like how you want to be perceived. The messaging is the outcome, right? It's how you communicate, how you want to be perceived, but it's really aligning on that center core. And I think that's where you'll get a lot of healthy debate, whether it be through leadership, competitive, your internal teams. I think just generally also messaging is very subjective. And I think that's why you've got a lot of energy around the topic.
I think a really common problem that I hear about sort of in our community is that, you know, when you actually see the messaging that goes out, for example, on a website, the battleground of the homepage, so to speak, it starts to get really generic. And I feel like homepages, if you were to just go and look at a number of homepages for leading tech companies, they'd probably like, and you stripped away all the branding and logos, you probably might not know who is who. And so, you know, I'm really curious, and this is the last question on this thread, is like, how have you all dealt with that situation when, you know, the messaging as it turns from gas to maybe reverse, solid to liquid to gas, as we're adding energy into the system? How are you ensuring that the gas and the solid are still, you know, of the same element, or, you know, still water?
I have a go-to quote or line that I use around messaging in this process specifically, which is, and it's true for like entrepreneurs in the early stage of like building new businesses, as well as for like product marketers, like owning messaging and building that for a company, is the refrain that like opinions are like assholes and everybody has one. The thing about it is that all opinions are not equal. And it's really up to both the people building that messaging and, you know, developing the headline and running it through all the various like approval processes that they might do, to be very like objective about the feedback they're hearing, the opinions that they're hearing, and like which ones matter and which ones make sense and which ones don't. And it's also up to us, I think, as leaders to like ensure that the conditions are in place for people to turn around to, say, the CEO of the company and say like, thank you for your feedback, and then not make the change. You're entrusted as product marketing to understand the customer and the persona and the buyer and the job to be done and how our product uniquely services that job. And that means that you need a whole line about what you think is the right words to put on the page.
Yeah, piggybacking on that, I think the phrase that I always think of when it comes to getting alignment, especially with senior stakeholders on messaging and positioning, is you need to turn the subjective into objective. So how do you bring in that objective validation, really, whether it's A/B testing from certain pages, whether it's talk to 15 customers, here were the notes, these are the things that strongly resonated. Our win-loss program, like it is, it comes through very strongly there, but the more you can take it out of the realm of subjective and into objective with actual supporting evidence from customers, from the market, the more alignment you can drive.
Yeah. Kevin, real quickly to answer, I think your question on like everyone sounding the same, especially I think with things like AI, which is the buzzword. I mean, my team was at Gartner last week and I'm like, AI is literally everywhere. I think this is where you can play into your company voice and tone, right? Or anchoring to your product or company differentiators. I think there are some companies that do this excellent, in a really excellent manner. But Ben and Jenna are right. Sometimes you just got to ship something and you got to, sometimes it is really common language and things you're seeing in the market, I think, especially when you've got newer things. So it's a delicate balance, depends on the target audience, where you are, what you're trying to achieve.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, ideally it is the convergence of a Venn diagram of, customers really value it. You credibly have differentiation or have strength there in your product, and it's competitively differentiated. And that middle of the Venn diagram is often very difficult to find, but like you got to keep pushing for it.
Awesome. Well, very great, awesome answers from y'all. And a great segue into the next question, which is around what are some of the best methods that y'all as leaders have used for measuring and testing messaging quality? And maybe even as a primer question would be like, what is messaging quality? Like, how do you know if messaging is good or not? It's probably, I think that's like a classic sort of question. But yeah, around measurement and testing, what have you found successful? What has worked? What hasn't worked as well? Who wants to jump in?
I'm happy to jump in. I mean, I think this is where we always say product marketers have the left brain and right brain, right? It's an art and science to it. At the end of the day, we're trying to create, compelling messages that sell products, right? So I think at the end of the day, I'm looking at revenue and adoption. Now, is it a direct correlation? No, I wish there were. But that is, our North Star as product marketers. In terms of measuring quality, it really starts with your target audience, right, Kevin? So we have an array of resources available to our product marketers where they can test that quality. And what I mean by quality is, does it resonate? Do you understand the idea? Does this make you want to buy it or use it or engage with it? We've got some, quantitative tools like research and research platforms where you can actually A/B test, to Jenna's point. But there is that qual aspect to it. So we'll go out and speak to customers and give them a few options, or lean on our go-to-market teams. They're talking to our customers day in and day out, and try to collect some quotes there. And so the one thing I always like to emphasize with my team is messaging is not a one-time thing. You don't just ship it and you forget about it, right? You are revisiting that thing, every week, if not at least monthly, to ensure that, it's fresh and it resonates with your target audience. Jenna, Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really hard to, it's a space where it's really hard to draw that like causality as opposed to correlation. And so I think something that has really helped in the places where I've been doing this more recently is just having more instrumentation out there to be able to capture more signal and data about the efficacy of how a message is landing or how copy is converting. And, I think we're in a really interesting time in 2023 where our ability to instrument some of this stuff is greater than it's ever been before. If I think about how we used to check in with sales about how certain messaging was landing, it used to involve walking downstairs to level 2 where the sales guys were and sitting on the desk and like peppering them questions like, how does that working? What's not working? And with tools like, Gong, I think you've got really interesting ways to instrument what were very like anecdotal sources of data. And to Jenna, your point, like to move from subjective to objective, like these are the tools to be able to do that are better than they've ever been. The weird thing about good messaging, I think, as a measure of like quality is, and again, it's kind of anecdotal, but like you tend to hear good messaging again and again and again. You hear it from your sales teams, you hear it from your customers, you hear your competitors adopt it. Good messaging comes back to you in very consistent and weird and wonderful ways. And I think that is why we are constantly pushing on our product marketers to be in front of customers and to be face to face with sales folks. Because if you're the one building that copy and taking it to market, you want to be in those conversations to see if you hear it and to see if it lights people up and to see if it makes people smile or to see if it like lands and you get nodding heads. Like I would hate to say to somebody like the only measure of good quality messaging is revenue and conversion rates, because that subjective feeling is incredibly powerful. And when it's not there, you feel it very, very strongly.
Yeah, I love that. It's exactly, and I think that's like the art of it, right? I love that. I love when our go-to-market teams actually get a tagline, right? You're like, oh, you remembered that. That's fantastic. Yeah.
You know what I also love is when you ship something like on your website or something, a new tagline, a new message that's nowhere else in the market, and then you, to Ben's point, you see a competitor steal it for their website and you're like, that's right, it's steal worthy. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And one thing that I've loved and has made me a better product marketer and better at messaging is I don't listen to podcasts. I listen to Gong calls as podcasts. So like when I'm cooking dinner or something like that, I just am constantly hearing not only our customers' language, or our prospects' language, but how our internal go-to-market teams are positioning it. And Ben, exactly to your point, like what lights them up? What do they smile and nod about? What just do they glaze over and quickly change the subject? That kind of input, it doesn't scale, but it's worth its weight in gold.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, it's always hard to find, like in the early days, you can listen to the Gong calls and then it gets harder, I think, as companies grow. Like, I have a question. So, when you're writing messaging, right, that's often sort of like a PMM, you're like sitting down at your desk, you're like, all right, I need to kind of clear the state, kind of get all my synthesis onto the page, right? You're at the end of the day, it's kind of going into some sort of document. For better or worse, it's a messaging framework that we've pulled off either some historical template or off the internet, right? How have you, as leaders and managers of teams, how are you sort of introducing a testing or measurement step like at that phase? Because my feeling is like as PMM orgs grow, you're like, you might have even hundreds of PMMs. Everyone, like at some point, every PMM might be crafting messaging throughout the course of a quarter or two, right? But by the time it gets out to the market, it's like, it's gone through the copywriting process. It's gone through the creative team. It's been when you see the pithy tagline, that's because oftentimes you've had some creative folks working on it, perhaps an agency. I'm curious, like, have you guys figured out any way to introduce the testing at the source, so to speak, so that way it's like it's solid before it even goes out to anyone else? I'm curious. I've never actually. I just came to my head because I've never actually done it myself. It's almost like you're always looking at copy, but not the messaging, which is like the source. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, you can socialize the actual messaging framework, but I would do that with caution because, to Ben's point, everyone has an opinion, and that's a quick way to get to the lowest common denominator with too many cooks in the kitchen. So I would say if you can, one of the ways I've actually done this is to turn it into just a few slides, like a really quick narrative that you can then put in front of internal people and customers and kind of tell the story in your own words, not actual messaging and not actual copy, but somewhere in between, and see what resonates and what feels off.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think those storyboards can go a really long way, particularly for like, you know, hey, look, I've got to get some executive eyes on this at some stage, but I definitely don't necessarily want to shoot a full message house to an executive audience and look at it together for 30 minutes. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun. I think I think finding ways that you can take an input artifact and make it digestible and make it something that, you know, internal audiences can react to is just a part of the job. If we're not doing that really proactively, you're going to have that surprise aha moment when you're ready to ship something to market and there isn't agreement, alignment across all the various people who need to have it. And I think like it's not a sexy or traditionally like marketing thing for us to get excited about, but like this is where like governance plays a really important part, and like how clearly and how explicit is that approval and governance process of messaging inside of your company. Yeah. Who is the final sign off? Is it a committee? How do you handle disagreement within a committee? Like these sorts of frameworks that you can make explicit and use and scale, I think become really important parts for how you deliver good messaging time and time again. You might get lucky and the agency nails it and everybody loves it right away once or twice. But if you're going to do that repeatedly and do it across a slew of products and do it in different contexts around events and web and all the different things, you need to have a great process. And I know I'm saying that as the XSAP guy, but like process is pretty important.
Yeah, so I'm the same, Ben. I'm super operationally driven. So getting that like alignment and framework is super important. You know, we talked about the testing of things, and to Jenna's point, like getting a storyboard, getting folks to get input, I think is really important. But the one other thing I want to call out is I also expect my product marketers to do their homework. So I need you to go out there and look at the competition. I need you to look at the landscape. What are the trends, so that we also have some sort of ways to litmus test it, right? Even before we put it in front of folks, just so they understand where this messaging sits within the larger framework. So that's just one other thing I encourage my team to actively do.
Awesome. This is also a great segue. We'll move on to the sort of the third area of questions, which is, we've already started talking about this, but getting messaging approved, getting the alignment on it, and then dealing with disagreements from senior stakeholders, sometimes the CEO, depending on the size of your company. It could be the CEO. So I'm actually really curious to hear from the panel. Do you have stories about how you've dealt with disagreements from senior stakeholders? Like what happens if the CEO or founder gets involved on a homepage or in a messaging framework document even, right? Has that ever happened to you? How do you deal with that type of thing? You know, it's almost like the hippos, the highest paid person's opinion kind of thing. Yeah, how do you deal with that as PMM leaders?
So I've done that a couple times, or more than a couple times, and it is it's a double-edged sword. So when you're meeting with especially someone like the CEO, they have this whole different perspective that you don't have. And you know, no matter how much homework you've done, they have been living and breathing this company, especially if it's a founder, for a long time. And they have this, you know, 10-year vision in their head that they may or may not have articulated. And so the way I approach those situations is less about like, okay, how do I just get approval and move on? But how do I use that perspective to make this amazing? And it usually comes down to just continually asking why. You know, so instead of just accepting at the face value, no, it needs to be this and it needs to be this, but okay, why? Like, why is that? Why do you feel that way? Why do you believe that? What am I not seeing that would lead you to believe that? And you get just such a rich source of insights and a totally different perspective that I almost always has made the work better. So as long as you build time in for that and doing working sessions and bringing them along, I think it's actually a really good thing.
Like huge +1, +100. Atlassian is a 25-year-old company that is still run to this day by the co-founders. No one knows this space the way these guys do. And the level of conversation they're having, the volume of conversation they're having, the transitions that they've driven, like that is incredibly valuable insight. And so like it would be wildly stupid of me to expect to run a messaging process and say that, we're just interested in an approval when, that is the embodiment of so much customer, market, and company like knowledge. And so I think exactly to your point, Jenna, is about like, how do we learn from that? And so like that framing even of the meeting or the session or like the 15 minutes that you're popping into another call for, to do that exercise, like even just framing that differently from we're looking for an approval today to we're giving you a look at a narrative that we're looking to take to market. And we just love your reactions to it. What do you love about it? What do you wish that it did instead? Like this little bit of hygiene that you can put around the way in which you get this feedback can make a huge difference. That design thinking principle of like, I love and I wish is your best friend as it relates to just trying to get feedback and input. And it is totally okay for any feedback you ever receive to just say, thank you for that feedback. You're not making a commitment to do anything about it, but hopefully you're learning from it. And that's what's most important.
I love that, Ben and Jenna. Fully agree with all of that. I think that's why I always like to say like messaging is a journey. It's not a one-time thing. It'll continue to change. And I love that approach of bringing our executives along for the ride. Like that's how I position it to my team, is like they're a part of this. They want, how exciting. Like this is part of the strategic, part of our jobs. And so, yeah, I would say, Kevin, I think the three of us have actively worked with our executives on it, and it's really just bringing them in as a part of the journey.
I love that. It's almost like if they're involved at key steps, then they're already bought in. By the time they kind of see a more sort of final sort of form of the messaging. Awesome. It's at the midpoint now, and as promised, we're gonna switch over to some audience questions. So if you are in the audience, we'd love for you all to upvote the questions that are already there. If you like to take a look at them, and also please add more. So I'm gonna go and pick one right now. This one I think relates back to our question around our area around measuring and testing messaging quality. So this question comes from an anonymous attendee. They ask, normally interviewing customers or prospects requires budget for incentives, at least at this individual's company. What are some of the best free or maybe more, cheaper methods for getting those insights to help you build out your positioning and messaging? Have any of you had experience sort of being scrappy? Perhaps this individual is at a smaller or earlier stage company.
I have a spicy take on this. The price of like customer interview is like the quality of your introduction. I spent close to a decade building new things at like very big incumbent companies. And something we would always push these teams for as part of the accelerator is like, how much customer validation do you have that like this business or product you want to build is like a meaningful product that customers are interested in solving this problem. And the folks who came from the big incumbent company most of the time would be like, well, I'm gonna do a bunch of interviews and I need a research team and all this stuff. The folks who tended to get the funding and tended to get the investment, or the more entrepreneurial people who were like, well, I've reached out to like 150 marketing managers to see if they have this problem. And I've spoken to like 50 of them. And this is what I learned from that. And you don't need to have a deal that you're about to do to get people on the phone and to start talking to them. You just need to be talking about something they care about. And if it's a problem they care about versus a solution that you're interested in selling, most people will give you like, look at what we're doing today. We're talking about a problem that we all care about. And you know, I've definitely seen examples where people talk about like, well, hey, I'm doing a bunch of these conversations of like 200 other marketing managers for companies that are like yours, and I might put together a report that tells you what I learned through that process. Are you interested in getting that? And is that going to give us like another 30 minutes together on the phone? These sorts of styles can take you very, very far. And in fact, if yeah, I think there's a place for like formal research and, you know, much more like interview driven qualitative like research studies, but 8 times out of 10, I'm way more stoked about the things that people have learned by just picking up the phone or going and meeting people and talking to their buyer. And you don't need to pay a dime to do that.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, folks love, our customers love products, right? And so we've got product in our title. Typically, like you can go on the phone and say, listen, you know, we work with our product and engineering teams. We'd love to hear how things are going. So there's so much, to Ben's point, like just asking them how it's going, learning some of these broader, asking some of these broader questions helps. And then you can obviously kind of pepper in the questions you want to ask and get out of it. I would say the other lever we often use is also just putting yourselves in your customer's shoes, right? Like maybe some of them want to get their brand out there, right? Or get their thought leadership out there. So also giving them an opportunity to say, hey, we'd love to use you as a quote or a testimonial, or we'd love for you to be a part of our event, right? Our coffee chat, something like that also certainly helps build that relationship.
And a couple kind of programmatic ways that you can build this into your organization and your foundation is customer advisory boards. That takes a minute to set up and to build and to run, but it generally is free, and you find willing companies that value that kind of exchange, and that's a great way to do it on a regular basis. And I've also found success making friends with customer success managers and just being like, hey, can I drop in on, you know, a few of your quarterly growth calls or your check-ins or whatever, like customers that you think are amenable to that, you know, and then you can not only just observe what they're talking about, but also usually ask a few questions of your own.
Awesome. Love that. Thank you so much. We'll mark that one as done. All right, next question. So I tried to skip this one for us as a group, but it seems to be popping up and it's very, very popular. It's got the most number of votes right now. And the question is from an anonymous attendee, what are the key elements that go into your messaging framework? This is kind of like, you know, like when everyone has their own version of something, or like, what's like an analogy when you, it's like, I can't think of one right now, but
Italian sauce.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's got their, everyone's got their own version of it, right? Or like, I'm not Korean, but I heard kimchi, like every single person has like their own version of it. I feel like that's like messaging frameworks. It's like we've all got our sort of our unique frameworks. But yeah, so we're gonna ask this question because everyone seems to be really into this question. What do y'all put into your frameworks?
So I have a hot take on this. You need different sauces for different dishes. So pizza sauce is different than a pasta sauce. I'm not going to continue with this analogy, but the context matters and the type of project matters. So a campaign messaging framework is very different from a product launch messaging framework, which is very different from a product line messaging framework or a company level messaging framework. But so I like to be flexible based on the context and what I know we're trying to achieve. But in general, I think there are some really common elements: key message, pillars, value propositions. I like to have some kind of market context and insights in there to really ground it in what we're hearing in the market. You can have a call out for some differentiators, personas, and what they're struggling with, and how you would message the solution to them specifically. But in general, I would I wish somebody had told me this as a younger PMM, that there is no one right messaging framework, and you have to be flexible and use your best judgment based on the situation.
Yeah. Jenna, you covered all the things that are on our MSDs. I'd say the only one addition is we also, when appropriate, have proof points too. So
Oh yeah, of course.
Product proof points, customer testimonials, etc. Those always help.
Yeah, I think you guys covered it. I'll give the annoying answer of like not answering the question and instead say like what goes into the artifact is like far less than you think. I think the number of like message houses I've seen over the years where they're just like scrolling pages of, and it's all those sections, right? And they're all really important sections, but they don't all require like paragraphs and many, many, many bullet points. I think I get most frustrated when I look at like a persona summary in an artifact like that. And it's like 15 different job titles. And like persona is an abstract for job title, just like isn't it. The persona is meant to like give me some level of understanding of like who they are, like what they care about. And you may feel like throwing more into these things is going to help like impart more wisdom. But it's that Mark Twain quote of like, I tried to write like a 1-page thing and I didn't have time. And so like, I don't know what the quote is, but like getting to like 7 words on something is incredibly difficult. But to have messaging that goes well and imparts insight to people and can result in meaningful copy, you've got to do that work, because otherwise it's just stream of consciousness on a page and a really long page. And you're using this artifact to try to distribute understanding and insight internally and eventually externally. And if you're not really disciplined about every word that goes into that input artifact, you're setting yourself up for failure. And so some of the best message artifacts I've seen are half a page, and they're succinct. And of course, like if people have more questions or they're looking for even more information that they can take to, as Jenna said, all the various different ways they're looking to use that messaging, that's why you can add like addendums and additional sections. But like the core understanding you're trying to articulate and impart to people takes far fewer words than I think we tend to think it does.
I cannot agree with that more. I've seen this fail time and time again, because exactly to your point, people are like, well, I want to express everything that I know and everything that people could potentially wonder. But what happens when you present someone with a wall of text is they read none of it. So it's like inversely correlated with actual comprehension and usage. So one thing that we actually do sometimes at Klaviyo is we have a PMM version and a rest of company version. So the PMM version, we've got the full detail in case anyone needs to pull it in for, various things, but it's kind of like the source document. And then we have the version we communicate out, which is just 3 pieces. It's what is it? Why is it different than anything else out there? And why will customers care?
Yeah. Jenna, we've also got a 3rd version for our executives. And the one thing I'll add in the MSD for them oftentimes is where this messaging fits in, right? So especially if you're at a company where you're releasing a lot, right? To both of your points, there's feature level messaging, product, portfolio, solution. Like they're oftentimes the first question they're asking is, okay, for me to review this, I just need to know where this fits in and how this will show up. So even setting some context on like, hey, this is very bottom funnel feature level messaging. You'll see it in a pitch deck on a slide. That just kind of helps them center themselves as they give feedback as well.
I love that. I'm definitely stealing that.
That's cool. Awesome. All right. So the question that I think the other question behind the question is, it's not about what goes into the framework. It's about how do you make sure that it gets adopted, right? That's what I'm hearing from y'all is like, at the end of the day, if no one is going to get value from the framework beyond yourself, the author, then it might not have as much value, right? So attendee, think about that. All right. Let's go on to another question. So this one, very sort of timely. How are you seeing generative AI affect your messaging, or how have you seen it being used? Have you been using it, in your team or beyond?
Yeah, I actually have been using it, and I know some of my team members too, because I use it as like a brainstorm partner. If you're like stuck on something, I can't tell you the number of times I'm like, give me a word for this that conveys this and this and this. And then it says, well, how about this? I'm like, no, it needs to be more action oriented. No, that has the implication of whatever. And I've found some really great wording on there, but I think we all can agree you can very easily tell when larger sections are written by AI, because it just is completely generic and jargony, and it will never have the specificity, the emotional resonance, and the relevance that a human written piece of messaging will.
Yeah, we have at Zendesk, we actually have a pilot with ChatGPT. So all of us are actually actively encouraged, and I encourage my team to use it as well for messaging and positioning. And Jenna, to your exact point, it's not to write it, but it's the brainstorming aspect. I'll say even like, give me feedback on it, knowing our company differentiators and X, Y, Z. And so there are a lot of creative ways, and it does certainly save my team a lot of time. So I would say if you're not using it, please get an account and try it. It's definitely helpful.
Yeah, likewise. I think we're seeing a few different experimentations of it, obviously, like in our product, and how we're having customers use products like Confluence to, leverage Gen AI to accelerate that writing process, or to like create summaries and all that sort of, I guess, a wave one kind of value of Gen AI. I think there's a lot of really interesting work being done around training models on the language of your company and your tone of your company, and being able to, take those models into customers as well. I also think about it in terms of, there's a balance here, as I think both of you touched on, like there's a lot of value in like maybe acceleration that you can do in brainstorming and in different phases. It is not a tool to deliver the output in its entirety. You got to think of Gen AI as like, it's essentially like a slot machine, like the brown fox, and then whatever the next word is, could be anything. Now it's pretty good, and it's been trained on a lot of data and different models that are out there, but you're trusting the articulation of your company's value to a slot machine. I think is not a wise move. I think that it can be really helpful in the backstage side of the house, but we'll see. Like the pace at which all of this is going means that we could see really strong models in a few months that have us rethink this. So I think the advice I would have for anybody right now is, if you're not already using Gen AI at some level, to start, and to think about how do you construct pilots and experiments where you can advance the use of that technology in pursuit of like a business goal and like a marketing piece of work, because that will not stay stagnant. It'll be different in 6 months from now.
Awesome. Yeah, very exciting sort of bleeding edge that we're all sort of living through right now with generative AI. Okay, great. I think we have time for at least one more question, and this one comes from Dia. First of all, this individual says that they're loving these insights, so thank you all very much. And they're wondering if y'all have any questions that you've sort of asked your sales or CS team to include in their discovery calls or QBRs to better understand the customer and then inform your messaging. So, and otherwise, have you all made any requirements or asks on your GTM teams to ask certain questions that then help you with messaging? maybe it's like a constant flow, getting that constant flow of feedback. Yeah, back to the PMM work.
I think the places I've seen this show up have been around hypotheses that we've had about the market or about problems or about how important those problems are to a specific buyer, if it's an industry vertical or a role type. I think this is why, again, it's kind of like the throwback to the lean startup and this idea of like how you build businesses. Like that framework is one that lends itself really well to marketing pursuit as well. Identifying hypotheses and testing against them is, work that pays dividends really, really well. So if you have a hypothesis about your buyer and what they care about, and use your website and your messaging as a way to test for that, but sales is just another channel to that, where you can maybe get some richer input in the signal that you're gathering on that hypothesis. So if you think that a problem is really important to this executive at this kind of company, I think that's where the kinds of questions that I'm looking for validation for from sales folks and customer success folks is, is this conversation coming up, and how do they stack rank this? And often it's been incredibly helpful at the early stages of an experiment where you're trying to sit, like, just trying to even form the hypothesis, to be able to get some more early signal on that much more quickly through that process than you can by like building a web page and putting copy into it and putting it into market and running ads and traffic to it. It's very helpful in that early direction setting of hypothesis testing.
Yeah, even just asking what keeps you up at night, or what would get you promoted, what would get you fired. Like really, if you're still in that early process before you have a hypothesis, and you are, that's also very applicable to persona research, but just really trying to understand what's super top of mind and painful for customers or prospects. And then, some buyer journey questions can also come in handy, like what would make you want to try and find a different solution to that? Like what would be painful enough that you would start doing all of the painful process of looking for something new. Those are some of my go-to ones.
Yeah, I think the question behind this one also is like, even if we did put the questions, even if we had all the sort of GTM folks include these questions, gathering them back into one place, like getting the actual feedback loop is probably challenging, unless you have like a tool, maybe like a Gong or something like that. Yeah, and I know I'm not a panelist. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a good systematic
Share it.
Well, first of all, if your team has a voice of customer team, they are going to be your new best friends, because they can kind of roll up those themes and patterns, and we've found that incredibly useful to be closely partnered with them. But the other thing that we do is we have a Slack channel that is integrated to Salesforce, and it has our closed won and closed lost notes. And just getting those kind of write-ups, and our sales team is really great about this, actually, including like a full paragraph for all the closed won and closed lost, and they include why they came to us, what they were struggling with, what really resonated with them about what we offered, why they chose to buy or why they didn't. Just getting all that passively pushed to you is just extremely valuable.
Yeah, I love that, Jenna. I think that's so smart. I think something we're actually starting an experiment around now is, through your voice of customer team, whether it's in product marketing or elsewhere, like, it's their job to like see all this signal and identify the patterns out of it. And like, that's really hard work. And it's kind of hard to do across like all these channels. And so we're trying to experiment with like, how do we use like a whiteboard or something like that to just be throwing these insights like curated by PMM, like, hey, I heard this on a Gong call, or I sat in this meeting and I heard this insight, or, I've seen this like click-through rate on this artifact perform or not perform. and just start dumping them all in. And then as like a month goes by, we're going to get all that team together. We're going to like, do the design thinking thing and start to group things and identify things. And then that's going to become the framework for like our voice of customer reporting that we do. But that's a team sport. Like there is experts who from sales ops have the win-loss data. There are experts from the field who have like input from like the latest, executive dinner we did. But it's PMM who can actually, I think, go do that work and collate, curate, and distill all of that into like, not just like insights, but I'm really pushing the team on how do we serve up not just insights, but like opinions. And so here's an opinion about how we think sales can sell better. Here's an opinion about what we think the product needs to look like if we're going to go after this market. And I think that kind of work for product marketing is something that just doesn't tend to get prioritized, and we need to do a better job of showing up in that way.
And I'm going to use that. It's a team, VOC is a team sport, because you're 100% right. It's not just us, it's so many teams across the board. Yeah, I think for a lot of PMMs, like just remember you are the voice of the customer, right? Like that is exactly what we live and breathe and do. So yeah, I think this gives me inspiration, Ben. Maybe like we schedule like a quarterly call with, PMMs and actually build this in.
Yeah, the whiteboard, like sticky note ideas. It's a great one.
Yeah.
I love this. Super, super valuable insight and tips and tricks from everybody here on the panel. I'm going to wrap up and hand the mic back over to Alex, but I just want to say personally, thank you, all three of you, so much for joining us today and sharing your super deep insights and value and giving back to the community. Thanks. Over to you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I'm going to wrap up with just a few closing announcements and also where you can find this session. So first of all, thank you to the panel and for Kevin for doing a fantastic job moderating. This was like great, insights. And just so everybody remembers like what ShareBird is, we're a Q&A site. We're leading executives answer your questions. I think the big superpower you get over time is you can search and find credible answers to your challenges. Ben, I think, is doing an AMA in November on pricing, and Candace is doing one on product launches. So if you have questions, go ahead and throw them there. This event was great. If you're interested in supercharging best practice sharing from people on your own team, like I said before, let me know. Live sessions are awesome. Sometimes the only challenge is it's a time intensive to search for what you need, especially for people who weren't there or new employees. And this knowledge is so great. So if you're down, we'd love to partner with you on trying to get an AMA going for your team. Lastly, if you have questions, feedback for the event, email me, alex@sharebird.com. The event recording will be up tomorrow on the event page. It'll be available to ShareBird Pro members. Okay, thanks everybody.